Welcome to the Tom Woods Show, episode 348. I am on my way right now to Florida Atlantic University, where I will be speaking tonight. The details are up at tomwoods.com/events. But I want to share with you today this episode with Warren Redlich, who joins us once again to talk about what is now a widely discussed initiative against DUI checkpoints and indeed police stops in general, how to handle yourself, what to do, how to make sure you don't get falsely accused of having alcohol on your breath. All kinds of nasty possibilities are out there, and Warren Redlich is going to navigate you through this in a very compelling way. You're definitely going to want to check out the show notes page for this episode because it's got this viral video that Warren Redlich's group has done. It's up on the Fair DUI YouTube channel. Warren Redlich is a Florida attorney. You can check him out at wredlich.com, REDLICH, wredlich.com, and also fairdui.org. He's the author of the book, Fair DUI. We'll have a few words to say about that as well. So here we go, talking to Warren Redlich. Warren Redlich, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much for having me on. It's a pleasure.
I can't get over, you were episode number 5. Here we are, episode number 348. And I guess it must be a delayed Tom Woods Show bump or something, because all of a sudden, what we were talking about in episode 5 has just exploded into the public consciousness, thanks in large part to this flyer that you've developed, that you're developing for a number of states, and to this video that's had nearly 2.5 million views since, I guess, just last month. So let's start off with a little bit of background, and then I want to get into what's been going on lately. We're talking about these laws pertaining to driving under the influence, and particularly now we're talking about these DUI checkpoints where everybody has to drive through and they think they have to roll down their window and talk to an officer, and the officer can assess whether they're intoxicated or not. Tell me about what your approach to all this is.
Sure. So the standard thing that happens either when you're pulled over or at a checkpoint is the driver, just by reflex or whatever, just rolls down their window without even being asked to roll down their window. Most drivers will just roll it down without even thinking about it. So part of the problem is, as a DUI defense lawyer, DWI defense lawyer, I've seen a lot of people, the start of their arrest begins when the police officer says the police language is, "I detected the strong odor of alcoholic beverage emanating from the vehicle." And then when they speak with the driver, people will routinely speak with the police officer. And the police officer will say, "I detected slurred speech." The driver had impaired speech in some way. And so the purpose of this flyer is to prevent those two in particular problems that my clients do that leads them toward getting arrested by not rolling down your window and not speaking at all. And we actually did a bunch of videos before the one that went viral, and they would typically get 3,000 views, maybe 5,000 views. So, in our dreams, we'd get 100,000. We're now over 2.5 million on that video, by the way.
Oh, wow. So it's going so fast that I checked it just days ago, and I'm already behind the times.
It is approaching 2.6 million, and that doesn't count. I know at least one other website someone posted it on without the guy's permission, and he just decided he wasn't going to enforce it because he wants more people to see it. So it's on thebreak.com, and that video's gotten like 150,000 views. So you add that up, and then there's been a lot of media attention. So, easily 3 million people have seen it in one way or another.
I've got it embedded at tomwoods.com/348, along with all the information about this episode. We'll talk about your book in a few minutes as well. But I want you to describe for me what we're going to see in this video, because I don't know if it's supposed to be funny, but I thought it was funny.
Sure. So what happens is and I did the video. I think you embedded is the one from my friend Jeff Gray, the one that's got 2.5 million views. That's one that he did on December 31st. We actually talked that day before he went to the checkpoint. He drives up to the video and he does something different from our other videos. He puts his driver's license, he puts the flyer, which says, "No, I remain silent, no searches, I want my lawyer," and has further instructions to the police. He puts his driver's license, registration, insurance, and title in the bag, and he hangs it out the window with a string. So the window is closed, But the police officer, if he wants, can not only see the documents, but if he wants, he can open up the Ziploc bag and take them out and hold them. So he pulls into the checkpoint. The police officer looks at the bag. He looks closely with his flashlight at what's in the bag, and then he waves the driver on. In other videos that we've done, that's the only time that I know of we've done the Ziploc bag method. And the other times that when I did it, other times when Jeff has done it and other people have done it, we simply place the flyer up against the window without hanging it out with the bag. And then any documents that are requested, we press those up against the window so the police can see them. So the Ziploc bag wasn't originally the idea, and there are some problems with the Ziploc bag approach, but that may have played a role in the video going viral.
What do you say to critics who would say, like, for example, Mothers Against Driving Drunk, believe it or not, is against your flyer? Because they say,
I noticed that.
Yeah, they say that it'll let drunks get away with being drunk. And they would probably say, I want to try to give them the strongest possible argument. I think their strongest possible argument would be we have to balance safety against the likelihood of police abuse. The likelihood of police abuse and the police claiming that you smell of alcohol seems fairly low as compared to the likelihood of getting killed by a drunk driver. So how do you answer that?
Well, I completely disagree with the characterization of what's likely and what's not likely. The likelihood of that driver, the alleged drunk driver who gets through the checkpoint killing someone, is extremely low. And in my experience as a defense lawyer, the likelihood that a police officer will make up slurred speech and the odor of alcoholic beverage is extremely high. So, I mean, in a lot of my cases, I've seen cases where a police officer will say he detected the odor of alcoholic beverage and the person blows a 0.00. I've seen many cases where on video my client has perfect speech and they claim speech was slurred. I had a client from Japan who they claimed his speech was slurred. I have no idea how they would know. I speak Japanese and I can't tell. But as far as the drunk driver using this method, I think that's difficult. The way this method operates is you need to be silent, patient, and follow instructions. And drunk people are generally not good at remaining silent, being patient, and following instructions. And in fact, when you understand, if you read my book talks about the field sobriety tests and what the police do at the roadside after they get you out of the car. And two of the things that they look for are whether you're impatient, whether you start their tests before you're supposed to, and whether you follow the instructions they give you. So if somebody is able to follow the instructions on the flyer and they're able to be patient and wait for the police officer to do what he wants to do, then they're probably going to do well on the police officer's tests on the side of the road as well. So I don't see where, I can't say that a drunk person won't get away with it. Of course that could happen, but that's not really the intent. And I don't think it's likely.
I myself have never been through one of these checkpoints, so I actually don't know what is supposed to happen. Let's say I'm the regular guy, I've never heard of Warren Redlick, and I just want to cooperate with law enforcement. What is supposed to happen? I roll down my window, and then what do? They're not going to give everybody a breathalyzer. What do they do?
So that's part of the mistakes that people are making about this approach. We do comply with the checkpoint. We do what is supposed to happen in the checkpoint. Most people do more than they're required to do in a checkpoint. So that's the big distinction. When what's supposed to happen in a checkpoint, if you ever read, you can contact any police agency that does checkpoints. Typically, you can ask them for what are called guidelines. They are required to have written guidelines, and in most states, there is some kind of open records law where you can request the written guidelines. We have gotten them from several checkpoints in Florida. And the typical instructions to the police officer about how he's supposed to conduct that part of the checkpoint where you pull in and he approaches your window is he's supposed to approach and say, "Hi, my name is Officer Johnson from the blank police department. Would you please show me your driver's license? Or may I please see your driver's license?" So when you put your license up against the window, he can see it. You have complied with his request. So it may be that they're going to start changing their guidelines and try to make it different. But as far as what every guideline I've seen, it always has the police officer ask the driver to let me see your license or please show me your license. And you are doing that, so you are complying.
But of course, just showing your license doesn't establish by any standard whether or not you are driving under the influence. So what do they expect to accomplish? How do they expect to determine that at a checkpoint?
Sure. So what they're hoping for and what people routinely do is they roll down their window and they engage the police officer in conversation. And that is what most people do. And frankly, even in I've represented many clients who have engaged police in conversation at a traffic stop. And in the course of doing so, they've admitted things that help them. Typically they'll say, yeah, I had a couple of beers. The police officer will say, have you had anything to drink tonight? And they'll say, yeah, I had a couple of beers. That's not a good thing to say when you're talking to a police officer after you've been pulled over in a checkpoint. Because if you say, yeah, I had a couple of beers, there's almost a guarantee that conversation is going to go further in a way you don't like. And even lawyers, executives, I've represented surgeons, but even lawyers will tell the police, yeah, I had a couple of beers. I have no idea did they miss that class in law school? I have, you have the right to remain silent. Why would you tell a cop you had a couple of beers? How is that going to help you? I don't know why. And so as far as the checkpoint goes or the traffic stop goes, yeah, the police officer expects you to roll down your window. He's hoping to engage you in conversation. But you as an American citizen or as somebody in America, you have the right to remain silent. You have the right to counsel, and you have the right to be free from unreasonable search and seizure. And the idea behind the card is by the flyer is you put it up in the window so the officer can clearly see it. Don't use darkly tinted windows. Don't try this if you have dark windows. I have a completely clear window on my driver's window. You hold the thing up so the police officer can read it, and he looks at it, and you have now you're in custody, right? You're not free to go when you're pulled over. When you're in a checkpoint, until they tell you you're free to go, you're not free to go. You're in some form of custody. When you assert your right to remain silent and your right to counsel, and if you've been arrested and you assert those rights, they cannot ask you any questions. They absolutely cannot. You have asserted your right to an attorney. They can't ask you anything without letting you get your attorney. And most police know that. But for some reason, they think in this context it's different, and it's not. You always have the right to remain silent. You always have the right to your attorney. So that this puts the police officer in a situation where their bosses hate, where the police chief doesn't want them to do this. Police chiefs and sheriffs do not want their deputies and officers to think. They want them to do routine things that don't require them to think. And this forces the police officer to think outside the box. And most cops are actually pretty good at that outside the box thinking, but some of them aren't. And that's kind of the idea. Make the police officer think.
Your flyer clearly confuses the police officers in the video because it's got precedents for every single bullet point that it's making about why you're behaving the way you are, why you are, in fact, cooperating and not being obstructionist, and you go on and list, and you say, by the way, if you were to require me to do the following things, that would be a violation. Well, actually, there's somebody who did a spin on your flyer.
Yeah.
But the point is that I'm sure your average police officer is not familiar with these various legal precedents and these case names, and so they just took one look at it and thought, well, I guess we better just let this guy through.
The flyer was actually designed for a traffic stop where you've been pulled over for speeding, you've been pulled over something, and the idea is the officer walks up to the window and it's like, oh no, what do I got now? What do I do with this? And a reasonably smart police officer, there are some that aren't smart enough to think of this, but the vast majority of police officers, I think, will respond to this by saying, okay, I don't know what section 322.15 is, and I'm not sure whether he's right or wrong. I better call my sergeant. And he goes on his radio and he calls the sergeant and says, Sergeant, what's 322.15? And the sergeant's going to be like, what's going on? Why are you asking me that? What do you mean? Why are you asking me that question? And so the officer then explains the situation, and the sergeant, being usually smarter than the average officer and wiser, it's really about wisdom rather than smart. But the sergeant, typically being wiser than the average officer, will say, you know what? Just let this guy go. We'll get the next guy. There's plenty of fish in the sea. We don't want the trouble that this could mean. And I've talked with police officers about this approach and how they should handle it. I'm actually working on a training document for police. I've been contacted by police